The blood on her hands had long since dried, but Sarah Coleman could still feel the weight of her husband's final words pressing against her chest like a branding iron. "You have failed me," Thomas had whispered from his deathbed 3 months past, his fever-bright eyes burning with disgust as he looked at the twin girls sleeping in their cradle. And Sarah knew in that moment that her life in Silver Creek, Montana territory would never be the same. It was late April in 1882, and the spring thaw had turned the main street into a river of mud that sucked at the wheels of passing wagons and the boots of miners heading to the saloons. Sarah stood outside the general store with her daughters, Emma and Eleanor, balanced on each hip. They were 8 months old now, with their mother's dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything with a curiosity that both delighted and terrified her. She had come to town to purchase flour and sugar, necessities she could no longer afford to make herself since Thomas died and left her with nothing but debts and a small cabin on worthless land. The door to the store opened, and Martha Whitfield emerged, her face pinched with the self-righteous superiority that seemed to come naturally to the wives of successful ranchers. She took one look at Sarah and the twins, and her lip curled. "Still clinging to those disappointments, I see," Martha said loudly enough that several passers-by turned to look. "A proper woman would have given her husband sons. 2 girls at once, that is just nature's way of showing what you are worth." Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks, but she kept her chin up. This was not the first time she had heard such words, nor would it be the last. In Silver Creek, a woman's value was measured by her ability to produce male heirs who could work the land and carry on a family name. She had failed spectacularly, delivering 2 daughters in a difficult birth that had left her weak for weeks and Thomas bitter until his death from pneumonia. The town had made its judgment clear. She was shunned at church socials, ignored at the market, and whispered about in every corner. "Excuse me, ma'am," Sarah said quietly, moving to step around Martha, but the older woman blocked her path. "You should have left those babies on the church steps and moved on," Martha continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "No decent man will ever want you now saddled with 2 useless mouths to feed. You are a burden on this town." Before Sarah could respond, a deep voice cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "I would say that is about enough, Mrs. Whitfield." Sarah turned to see a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of summer sky standing behind her. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun, but there was something in his bearing that spoke of confidence and strength. She did not recognize him, which meant he was likely new to Silver Creek. Martha's face flushed with indignation. "And who might you be to interfere in matters that do not concern you?" "Name is Cole Merrick," the cowboy said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that was somehow both polite and dismissive. "And I am making it my concern this lady looks like she is trying to go about her business in peace, and you are preventing that." Martha huffed and gathered her skirts, shooting Sarah a venomous look before stalking away down the boardwalk. Sarah stood frozen, unsure whether to thank this stranger or flee before he too realized what a pariah she was in this town. Emma chose that moment to start fussing, and Sarah shifted her weight, trying to soothe both girls. "Thank you," she said finally, meeting Cole's eyes for just a moment before looking away. "That was kind, but unnecessary. I am used to such treatment." Cole frowned, and Sarah noticed the way his jaw tightened. "No woman should have to get used to being spoken to like that," he said, "especially not one with her hands full taking care of 2 little ones. May I help you with your shopping?" Sarah hesitated. Accepting help from a strange man could make the gossip even worse, but her arms were aching and she still needed to purchase supplies. "I do not want to impose," she said carefully. "No imposition at all," Cole said, and there was a warmth in his voice that made something in Sarah's chest loosen just slightly. "I just arrived in town this morning and I have got nothing but time. Besides, I always did believe in lending a hand when it is needed." Against her better judgment, Sarah nodded and allowed Cole to follow her into the general store. The proprietor, Mr. Henderson gave her the same cold look he always did, but seemed slightly more willing to serve her with Cole standing nearby. She made her purchases quickly, painfully aware of how little she could afford, and Cole carried the small sack of supplies without comment. Outside, he helped her secure the bag in the back of her small wagon, an old buckboard that had seen better days. Emma and Eleanor had both grown fussy in the warm afternoon air, and Sarah felt the familiar panic rising in her chest. It was a 3-mile drive back to her cabin, and if the girls started crying in earnest, she would have to stop multiple times to nurse and comfort them. "Where are you headed?" Cole asked, as if sensing her distress. "My cabin, west of town," Sarah said, lifting Eleanor into the wagon bed where she had made a safe nest of blankets. "Thank you again for your help, Mr. Merrick. You have been far kinder than you needed to be." Cole looked at her for a long moment, and Sarah felt something shift in the air between them. "I notice your wagon has a loose wheel," he said finally. "The front left one. It would not be safe to drive all that way without fixing it first." Sarah's heart sank. She had noticed the wobble, but had hoped it would hold just a little longer. She did not have money to pay a wheelwright, and she certainly did not have the skill to fix it herself. "I will manage," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Tell you what," Cole said, squatting down to examine the wheel more closely. "I have got some tools and I can tighten this up for you right now. Would not take more than 20 minutes, unless you're in a terrible hurry." Sarah looked at this strange cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere and shown her more kindness in an hour than the entire town had shown her in months. She should refuse, should protect what little remained of her reputation. But Emma was starting to wail, and Eleanor would join her soon, and the thought of the wheel coming off halfway home with her daughters in the wagon was too terrifying to contemplate. 20 minutes, she agreed, and Cole's face broke into a smile that transformed his entire appearance. True to his word, Cole had the wheel tightened and secured in short order. He worked with the easy competence of a man who had spent his life solving problems with his hands, and Sarah found herself watching him despite her best intentions. When he finished, he stood and brushed the dust from his knees, looking pleased with himself. "There you go," he said. "Should hold you just fine now. But if you do not mind me saying, you are going to need a new wheel before too long. This one has seen its best days." "I will add it to the list," Sarah said with a tired smile that did not quite reach her eyes. The list of things she needed and could not afford was longer than her arm. Cole hesitated, and Sarah could see him weighing his words. "Ma'am, I do not mean to overstep, but I heard what that woman said to you earlier, about your daughters. I want you to know that she is wrong." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them back furiously. She had become an expert at not crying in public. "You are kind to say so, but the whole town thinks the same way. I failed to give my husband sons, and now I am paying the price." "That is the most foolish thing I have ever heard," Cole said bluntly, "and I have heard some mighty foolish things in my time. Children are a blessing, every single one of them, regardless of whether they are boys or girls. Any man who cannot see that is not worth mourning." The tears came then, despite Sarah's best efforts, sliding down her cheeks in hot tracks. No one had said anything like that to her since Thomas died. No one had suggested that her daughters were anything other than a disappointment and a burden. Cole looked alarmed at her tears and pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, offering it to her with an awkward gentleness. "I am sorry," Sarah said, wiping her eyes. "You must think me ridiculous, crying over a stranger's kind words." "I think you have been carrying too much alone for too long," Cole said quietly, "and I think this town ought to be ashamed of itself for treating you the way it has." Sarah managed a watery laugh. "You've only been here a few hours and you're already making enemies? Are you sure you want to stay in Silver Creek?" Cole's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I have not decided yet. I am looking for work, preferably on a ranch where I can use my skills with horses and cattle, but I have to say the welcome has been somewhat lacking so far." "The Morrison Ranch is hiring," Sarah said, grateful for the change of subject. "They lost several hands over the winter, and spring roundup is about to start. The ranch is about 5 miles north of town." I appreciate the information, Cole said. He paused, then added, Would it be too forward of me to ask if I could call on you sometime? Maybe bring some supplies out to your cabin? I noticed you did not buy much today, and it seems to me that you and those little girls might need more than what you got. Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. She could not afford to give the town more ammunition for their gossip, and she certainly could not afford to let herself hope that any man might genuinely care about her welfare. But there was something in Cole's eyes, a sincerity that she had not seen in so long, and she found herself nodding before she could think better of it. I would not turn away help if it is genuinely offered, she said carefully, but I cannot pay you, Mr. Merrick. I want to be clear about that. I am not asking for payment, Cole said firmly. I am asking to help a lady in need, and maybe get to know her a bit better in the process, if that is all right with you. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest that she had not experienced since she was a young girl, before marriage and disappointment had taught her to guard her heart. That would be all right, she said softly. My name is Sarah Coleman. My cabin is the small one with the blue door, 3 miles west on the creek road. Sarah, Cole repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. I will come by tomorrow afternoon if that suits you. Tomorrow afternoon, Sarah agreed, and for the first time in months she felt something like hope stirring in her heart. The drive home was easier than usual despite the rutted road and the afternoon heat. Emma and Eleanor dozed in their nest of blankets, lulled by the wagon's movement, and Sarah let her mind wander. She knew she was being foolish, letting herself think about Cole Merrick and his kind words, but it had been so long since anyone had looked at her with anything other than disdain or pity. She would allow herself this small indulgence, just for today. The cabin came into view as she rounded the last bend in the road. It was small and plain, with rough-hewn logs and a sod roof that leaked when it rained, but it was hers. Thomas had built it when they first married, full of dreams about the ranch he would build, and the sons who would help him work it. Those dreams had died along with him, leaving Sarah with nothing but memories and 2 daughters who deserved better than the hand life had dealt them. She unhitched the horse, a patient old mare named Bessie, who was worth more than everything else Sarah owned combined, and carried her sleeping daughters inside one at a time. The cabin was dim and cool, a single room with a cook stove, a bed, and the cradle that Thomas had made with his own hands before the twins were born. Sarah laid the girls down gently and stood for a moment watching them sleep. They were beautiful, her daughters. Emma had a stubborn little chin, and Eleanor had a dimple in her left cheek that appeared when she smiled. They looked so much like Sarah's own mother, who had died when Sarah was just a child, and she felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. Whatever else happened, she would make sure they grew up knowing they were loved and valued, even if the rest of the world thought they were disappointments. That night, after the girls were fed and settled, Sarah sat outside on the small porch and watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air was cool and carried the scent of sagebrush and pine. She thought about Cole Merrick and wondered what had brought him to Silver Creek. He had the look of a man who had traveled far and seen much, and there was a sadness in his eyes that spoke of losses she could only guess at. But there was also kindness and strength, and something else she could not quite name. She told herself not to hope too much. He would realize soon enough what being associated with her meant in this town, and he would disappear like morning mist. But still, as she went inside and prepared for bed, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow afternoon with an anticipation that felt both dangerous and delicious. Cole arrived at 2 o'clock the next day, riding a handsome chestnut gelding and leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. Sarah had spent the morning cleaning the cabin and herself, telling herself she was being ridiculous but doing it anyway. She had put on her best dress, a faded blue calico that had once been her favorite, and pinned her dark hair up in a style that made her look less like a haggard widow and more like the young woman she had been before life wore her down. She stepped out onto the porch as Cole dismounted, and she saw his eyes widen slightly when he looked at her. "Good afternoon," he said, removing his hat. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Not at all," Sarah said, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "You are very punctual. My mother raised me to believe that being late is the height of rudeness. Cole said with a grin. He gestured to the pack horse. I brought some things I thought you might need. Flour, sugar, coffee, some dried meat, beans, a little bit of everything, and some fabric I thought might be nice for the girls. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Mr. Merrick, that is too much. I cannot accept such charity. It is not charity, Cole said firmly. Think of it as payment for some good conversation and maybe a cup of that coffee. I got hired on at the Morrison Ranch this morning, and I drew my first week's wages in advance. Let me spend them how I please. Sarah wanted to argue, but the truth was that she desperately needed everything he had brought. Her pride warred with her practicality, and practicality won. Then you must stay for supper, she said. It is the least I can do to thank you. Cole's face lit up. I would be honored. They unloaded the supplies together, and Sarah was overwhelmed by the generosity of what Cole had brought. There was enough here to keep her and the girls fed for weeks, maybe longer if she was careful. As they worked, Emma and Eleanor woke from their nap and began to fuss, and Sarah hurried inside to tend to them. When she emerged with a twin on each hip, she found Cole had finished unloading and was standing in the yard, looking out at the surrounding land with an assessing eye. You have got good water here, he said, nodding toward the creek that gave the road its name, and decent grazing land. With some work, this could be a fine little homestead. That was my husband's dream, Sarah said quietly, but he died before he could make it a reality, and I do not have the money or the strength to do it alone. Cole turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. Maybe you do not have to do it alone, he said. Before Sarah could respond, Emma reached out her chubby hands toward Cole, making the happy burbling sounds that meant she wanted to be held. Sarah was mortified. I am sorry, she does not usually take to strangers. May I? Cole asked, and at Sarah's hesitant nod, he took Emma into his arms with a practiced ease that surprised her. Emma settled against his chest immediately, grabbing at the buttons on his shirt with fascinated fingers. Cole laughed, a rich, warm sound that made Eleanor squirm in Sarah's arms, demanding equal attention. They are beautiful, Cole said softly, looking down at Emma with such tenderness that Sarah felt tears threaten again. What are their names? Emma and Eleanor, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Emma is the one trying to remove your buttons, and this is Eleanor. Hello, Emma. Hello, Eleanor, Cole said, addressing the twins with perfect seriousness. It is very nice to meet you both. I am Cole, and I think we are going to be good friends. They went inside, and Sarah put Eleanor in the cradle while she started preparing supper. Cole sat at her small table with Emma in his lap, entertaining her with a piece of string and keeping up a running commentary that made Sarah smile despite herself. She had never seen Thomas interact with the girls this way. He had barely looked at them after they were born, his disappointment too bitter to hide. You are good with children, Sarah observed, as she sliced potatoes into a pot. Cole shrugged, his attention still on Emma. I come from a big family, 7 brothers and sisters, and I was somewhere in the middle, so I grew up helping with the little ones. I always figured I would have a house full of kids myself someday. And you never married? Sarah asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was too personal, too forward, but Cole did not seem offended. Came close once, huh? He said, his voice taking on a distant quality. Her name was Catherine. We were engaged to be married, had the date set and everything. But she got sick that winter, a fever that would not break. She died 3 days before our wedding was supposed to happen. I am so sorry, Sarah said, and she meant it with all her heart. It was 5 years ago now, Cole said. I have made my peace with it mostly, but it changed me, made me realize that life is too short to waste on things that do not matter, and too precious to let real happiness slip through your fingers when you find it. Sarah felt his eyes on her and busied herself with the cooking, her cheeks warm. They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by Emma's happy babbling and the sounds of supper preparation. When the stew was ready, Sarah set the table and they ate together, talking about inconsequential things. Cole told her about his journey from Wyoming, where he had been working on a large cattle operation. He spoke of wide open spaces and herds that numbered in the thousands, of roundups that lasted weeks, and the camaraderie of the bunkhouse. "Why did you leave?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Cole was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I got tired of working for other men's dreams," he said finally. "I am 30 years old, and I have been cowboying since I was 14. I have saved most of my wages over the years, and I have got enough now to think about starting something of my own. I came to Montana because I heard there was still good land to be had, places where a man could build something that would last." "And what do you think now that you are here?" Sarah asked. Cole looked at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her pulse quicken. "I think Montana might have more to offer than I expected," he said quietly. After supper, Cole helped Sarah wash the dishes, an act so domestic and unexpected that she found herself relaxing in a way she had not in months. They talked as they worked, sharing stories of their childhoods and their families. Sarah learned that Cole's parents had run a small farm in Missouri and that he had left home at 14 after a drought destroyed their crops and scattered the family. Cole learned that Sarah had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a shopkeeper, and had come west as a mail-order bride at 18, full of romantic notions about frontier life. "It was not what I expected," Sarah admitted, as they finished the last of the dishes. "Thomas was not what I expected. He was a hard man, made harder by the difficulties of trying to survive out here, and when I could not give him sons, he became bitter and cold. I tried to be a good wife, but it was never enough." Cole reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle around hers. "Any man who could not see your worth was a fool," he said firmly, "and any man who would blame you for the gender of your children was not worthy of being their father." Sarah looked up at him, at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying, and she felt something crack open in her chest. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she whispered. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Cole smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Maybe I'm being kind because you need kindness," he said. "Or maybe I'm being kind because from the moment I saw you yesterday holding those beautiful babies and standing up to that awful woman with your head held high, I knew you were someone special. Someone worth knowing." "Cole," Sarah breathed, and she did not know what else to say. "I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give," Cole said quickly. "I know you are still grieving your husband, still finding your feet. But I would like to keep calling on you if you will let me. I would like to get to know you better, and those precious girls. And maybe in time, you might come to care for me the way I am already starting to care for you." Sarah knew she should be cautious, should protect her heart and her daughters from the possibility of more disappointment. But when she looked at Cole, she saw only honesty and hope, and she found herself nodding. "I would like that," she said softly. "I would like that very much." Cole left as the sun was setting, promising to return in a few days when his work at the ranch allowed. Sarah stood on the porch and watched him ride away, her heart feeling lighter than it had in longer than she could remember. Inside, Emma and Eleanor were playing on a blanket on the floor, and Sarah knelt beside them, gathering them both into her arms. "We are going to be all right," she told them, though they were far too young to understand. "Things are going to get better. I can feel it." Over the next few weeks, Cole became a constant presence in Sarah's life. He came whenever he had time off from the ranch, always bringing something useful: a sack of oats for Bessie, fresh meat from a hunting trip, lumber to patch the leaking roof. But more than the material help, he brought laughter and conversation and a warmth that filled the cabin and chased away the loneliness that had haunted Sarah for so long. The town, of course, noticed. Sarah heard the whispers when she went to buy supplies, saw the disapproving looks from the church-going women. But Cole was there beside her now, his presence a shield against the worst of the gossip. And slowly, imperceptibly, the tone began to shift. Cole was respected at the Morrison Ranch, known for his skill with horses and his willingness to work hard. His friendship with Sarah lent her a measure of respectability she had not possessed before. One afternoon in late May, Cole arrived at the cabin with a wagon full of young chickens and the materials to build a coop. Every homestead needs chickens, he declared, and spent the rest of the day constructing a sturdy hen house while Sarah watched and helped where she could. Emma and Eleanor, now nearly 10 months old and beginning to pull themselves up on furniture, were fascinated by the birds and spent hours watching them scratch and peck. "You are doing too much," Sarah protested as Cole finished the coop and stood back to admire his work. "I will never be able to repay you for all of this." Cole wiped the sweat from his brow and grinned at her. "I told you, I am not looking for repayment. Besides, I am investing in my own future here." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, her heart beginning to beat faster. Cole set down his tools and came to stand in front of her, taking both her hands in his. "Sarah Coleman, I know it has only been a few weeks, but I need you to know that I am falling in love with you and those beautiful daughters of yours. I wake up every morning thinking about you, and I go to sleep every night wishing I could be here with you. You have been through hell and back, and you have come out stronger and more beautiful than any woman I have ever known. I want to be part of your life, if you will have me." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, her voice shaking. "I did not think I could feel this way again, did not think I deserved to. But you have shown me that I was wrong." Cole pulled her into his arms, and Sarah melted against him, feeling safe and cherished for the first time in her adult life. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's embrace, until Emma's cry from inside the cabin reminded them that they were not alone. "I should go check on them," Sarah said reluctantly, pulling back. "Wait," Cole said, catching her hand. "There is something else I need to say. I've been saving money for years, like I told you. I've got enough to buy land and start a ranch of my own. I was planning to look for property this summer, maybe file a claim on some of the open range. But standing here, looking at this place, I keep thinking that everything I need is already right here." Sarah's eyes widened. "Cole, what are you saying?" "I am saying that this land has good water and good grass, and with some work it could support a nice herd of cattle. I am saying that this cabin could be expanded, made into a real home for a real family. And I am saying that I want that family to be us. You, me, Emma, and Eleanor. And maybe more children down the road if we are blessed." He squeezed her hands. "I always wanted a big family, Sarah, and I cannot think of a better way to start than with you and those two perfect little girls." Sarah could hardly breathe. "You would really want that? Truly? To take on a widow with twin daughters, to build a life here in this place that everyone else sees as worthless?" "This place is not worthless, and neither are you," Cole said fiercely. "And as for Emma and Eleanor, they are not burdens to be taken on. They are blessings to be cherished. I would be honored to be their father if you will let me. I would be honored to be your husband if you will marry me." Sarah laughed through her tears, a sound of pure joy that she had not made in years. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, I will marry you, Cole Merrick, and we will build a life here together, all of us." Cole swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her for the first time, a sweet, gentle kiss that held the promise of all the days to come. From inside the cabin, Emma and Eleanor began to wail in earnest, and Sarah and Cole broke apart, grinning at each other like fools. "I suppose we should go attend to our daughters," Cole said, and the way he said "our" made Sarah's heart swell with happiness. They were married a month later, in late June, when the wildflowers covered the meadows, and the days were long and warm. It was a small ceremony held in the cabin yard with only a handful of guests. The Morrison family came, the rancher having grown fond of Cole, and curious about the woman who had captured his best wrangler's heart. The circuit preacher performed the ceremony, his words simple but heartfelt. Sarah wore a new dress that she had sewn herself from fabric Cole had bought in town, a soft cream color that made her dark eyes glow. Cole wore his best shirt and a new vest, and he could not stop smiling. Emma and Eleanor, dressed in matching gowns of pink calico, were held by Mrs. Morrison during the ceremony. They were nearly a year old now, beginning to take their first wobbly steps and say their first words. "Da," Emma had said just that morning, reaching for Cole, and he had looked at Sarah with such wonder that she had burst into tears. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed Sarah with a passion that made Mrs. Morrison fan herself and Mr. Morrison chuckle. The small group shared a meal of roasted chicken and fresh bread, and Sarah felt surrounded by genuine warmth for the first time since coming to Silver Creek. That night, after their guests had departed and the twins were asleep in their cradle, Cole and Sarah lay together in the bed that was now theirs. He held her close, his strong arms wrapped around her, and Sarah felt a peace she had never known. This was what marriage was supposed to be, she realized. Not the cold duty and disappointment of her first marriage, but this warmth and partnership and love. "Are you happy?" Cole murmured against her hair. "Happier than I ever dreamed I could be," Sarah replied honestly. "You have given me everything, Cole. Hope and love and a future I can believe in." "You have given me the same," Cole said. "A family, a home, a reason to work and build and dream." "I meant what I said, Sarah. I always wanted a big family, and now I have the start of one." Sarah smiled in the darkness. "About that," she said softly, "I have been meaning to tell you something. I think we might be adding to our family sooner than expected." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her, his eyes wide in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Sarah, are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am with child," Sarah confirmed, placing his hand on her still flat belly. "I am only a few weeks along, but I am certain. Are you pleased?" Cole's whoop of joy woke the twins, who began to cry, but he did not care. He kissed Sarah deeply, then scrambled out of bed to tend to Emma and Eleanor, scooping them both up and dancing around the cabin with them while Sarah laughed and cried and felt her heart overflow with love. The summer passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Cole had given his notice at the Morrison Ranch, explaining his plans to start his own operation on Sarah's land. Mr. Morrison, impressed by Cole's dedication and skill, offered to sell him a dozen head of cattle on credit, a gesture of goodwill that both Sarah and Cole accepted with gratitude. Cole spent his days building fences in a small barn, breaking horses and tending the growing herd. Sarah managed the cabin and the garden, caring for the twins and preparing for the baby that would arrive in the spring. The town's attitude toward them had shifted dramatically. Cole was respected for his hard work and clear devotion to his family, and Sarah found herself included in social events she had been shut out of before. Some of the same women who had shunned her now stopped to admire Emma and Eleanor when Sarah brought them to town, and Sarah was gracious enough not to remind them of their previous cruelty. She was too happy, too content in her new life to waste energy on old grudges. In August, they attended the county fair in Billings, making the journey in their newly repaired wagon with the twins bouncing excitedly in the back. It was a grand adventure, with livestock shows and pie contests and a dance that lasted until midnight. Cole entered one of his horses in the riding competition and took second place, winning a prize of $5 that he immediately spent on toys for the girls and a pretty shawl for Sarah. They danced under the stars that night, Cole's arms around Sarah's waist, her head resting on his shoulder. She could feel the small swell of her belly between them, the promise of their future growing there. "I love you," she whispered, the words still feeling new and precious in her mouth. "I love you too," Cole replied, his voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible. You and our girls and this little one on the way, you are my whole world, Sarah Merrick." Sarah smiled at the sound of her new name, Sarah Merrick. It sounded like a fresh start, like a woman who was loved and valued and whole. She held Cole tighter and let herself believe, truly believe, that her life had finally become everything she had hoped for. The winter was harsh that year, with snow that piled high against the cabin walls and temperatures that dipped below zero for weeks at a time. But inside, the cabin was warm and full of life. Cole had expanded the structure during the fall, adding a second room that would serve as a bedroom for the children. He had also built up the walls and improved the roof, so when the snows came, they were snug and dry. Emma and Eleanor were walking now, toddling around the cabin and getting into everything with the fearless curiosity of children who felt safe and loved. They adored Cole, following him everywhere and demanding his attention with imperious gestures that made Sarah laugh. He was endlessly patient with them, spending hours building block towers for them to knock down or reading to them from the few books they owned. Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body rounding with the child she carried. She felt different this time, stronger and more confident. With Thomas, she had been young and frightened, carrying her babies alone and dreading the birth that might kill her. Now she had Cole beside her, his steady presence a constant reassurance. He fussed over her like a mother hen, insisting she rest when she was tired and taking over the heavier chores without complaint. "You are going to spoil me," Sarah teased one afternoon as Cole brought her a cup of tea and insisted she put her feet up. "Good," Cole said firmly, settling the twins at her feet with a set of wooden animals he had carved. "You deserve to be spoiled. You are carrying our child and raising these two beautiful girls. That is more work than anything I do." Sarah reached out and took his hand, pulling him down to sit beside her. "We are a team," she said softly, "partners in everything. I could not do any of this without you." "And I could not do any of this without you," Cole replied, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "We are building something real here, Sarah, something that will last." In March of 1883, Sarah went into labor on a bright morning when the snow was finally beginning to melt. Cole sent word to the midwife in town, a kindly woman named Mrs. Chen, who had delivered half the babies in Silver Creek. Then he paced the cabin like a caged animal while Sarah labored, Emma and Eleanor watching with wide, curious eyes from their corner. The birth was faster and easier than Sarah's first delivery, and when she finally pushed their son into the world, she heard Cole's gasp of wonder. Mrs. Chen cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft blanket before placing him in Sarah's arms. He was perfect, with a cap of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. "A son," Cole breathed, kneeling beside the bed with tears streaming down his face. "We have a son, Sarah." "We do," Sarah agreed, her own tears falling freely. "What should we name him?" Cole thought for a moment, then smiled. "How about James, after my father? James Cole Merrick." "James," Sarah repeated, testing the name. "I love it. Hello, James. Welcome to our family." Emma and Eleanor, who had been watching the proceedings with fascination, toddled over to peer at their new brother. "Baby," Emma said clearly, reaching out one chubby finger to touch James's hand. "That is right, sweetheart," Cole said, lifting Emma up so she could see better. "This is your baby brother. We are all going to take care of him together." The household settled into a new rhythm with James's arrival. Sarah marveled at how different everything felt this time. With the twins, she had been isolated and overwhelmed, but now she had Cole to share the burdens and joys. He changed diapers and walked the floor with a crying baby at midnight, all while making Sarah laugh with his running commentary on fatherhood. "No one tells you that babies can produce this much mess, Omaifra," he declared one afternoon while changing James's diaper for the third time in an hour. "It is like a natural disaster in miniature." Sarah laughed from where she sat mending clothes, Emma and Eleanor playing at her feet. "Wait until he starts eating solid food. Then you will really understand the meaning of mess." Spring turned to summer, and the ranch began to thrive. Cole's hard work and natural skill with animals paid off, and their small herd grew. They added chickens and pigs, and Cole began breaking horses to sell, a lucrative sideline that brought in much-needed cash. Sarah planted a large garden and began selling her excess vegetables in town, her cheerful demeanor and quality produce making her a popular figure at the market. The children flourished. Emma and Eleanor were bright and energetic, their personalities emerging more each day. Emma was bold and adventurous, always climbing things and exploring, while Eleanor was gentler, preferring to stay close to Sarah and help with James. The twins doted on their baby brother, bringing him toys and patting his head with surprising gentleness for toddlers. One evening in late July, as Sarah and Cole sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard, Sarah felt a contentment so complete it almost frightened her. "Sometimes I'm afraid I will wake up and discover this has all been a dream," she confessed to Cole, "that I am still alone in this cabin with the twins, still shunned and struggling." Cole pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "This is real," he said firmly. "We are real. This family we have built together is real. And I promise you, Sarah, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel alone or unwanted again." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder and watched Emma chase Eleanor around the yard, both girls shrieking with laughter while James dozed in his cradle nearby. This was her life now. Not the lonely, desperate existence she had known with Thomas, but this vibrant, joyful reality full of love and laughter and purpose. "I want more," she said suddenly, surprising herself. Cole looked down at her, confused. "More what?" "More children," Sarah clarified, feeling her cheeks heat. "You said you always wanted a big family, and so did I. I want to fill this house with children, Cole, as many as we are blessed with." Cole's face broke into a grin so wide Sarah thought it might split his face. "Are you sure? 3 children is already a handful." "I am sure," Sarah said firmly. "I spent so long believing I was a failure because I bore daughters instead of sons. But you showed me that every child is a blessing, and I want as many blessings as God sees fit to give us." "Then that is what we will have," Cole said, kissing her soundly. "A house full of children and a lifetime of love. I cannot think of anything I want more." True to their word, the Merrick family continued to grow. In 1884, Sarah gave birth to twin boys, whom they named Daniel and David. Cole was beside himself with joy, declaring that his family was now perfectly balanced with 2 girls, 3 boys, and a wife who was the center of his world. Sarah recovered quickly from the birth and returned to managing the household with the help of Emma and Eleanor, who at 3 years old were already showing signs of being excellent big sisters. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Cole's reputation as a horsebreaker spread throughout the territory, and he began to command premium prices for his work. They purchased more land and expanded their herd, hiring a few hands to help with the work. The cabin had been expanded twice more, now a sprawling ranch house with multiple bedrooms and a large kitchen where Sarah held court. In town, the Merricks were respected and admired. Sarah had become known for her kindness and her strength, and she made it her mission to help other women who found themselves in difficult circumstances. When she heard of a widow struggling to feed her children, Sarah appeared on her doorstep with food and offers of help. When an unmarried woman found herself pregnant and shunned, Sarah stood beside her at church and dared anyone to speak a word against her. "You are turning into quite the crusader," Cole teased one evening, after Sarah had spent the day organizing a fundraiser for the new schoolhouse. "Someone has to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves," Sarah replied, though her eyes were twinkling. "I remember what it felt like to be cast aside and judged. I will not let that happen to anyone else if I can help it." Cole pulled her into his arms, mindful of her growing belly. She was pregnant again, with what they both hoped would be their 6th and possibly final child. "I am so proud of you," he said softly, "not just for the mother you are to our children, but for the woman you have become, strong and fierce and compassionate. You inspire me every single day." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes, though whether they were from Cole's words or her pregnancy emotions she could not say. "I am only who I am because you loved me when no one else would," she said. "You saw value in me and in my daughters when the whole world said we were worthless. You gave me the courage to believe in myself." We saved each other, Cole corrected gently. I was drifting before I met you, looking for something I could not name. And then there you were, standing in the street with your beautiful daughters and your head held high despite everything. You were exactly what I needed, even though I did not know it yet. They stood together in the gathering dusk, surrounded by the sounds of their children playing inside the house. Emma was reading to the twins, her voice clear and confident. Eleanor was helping Daniel build something with blocks, while David provided enthusiastic if unhelpful commentary. James was likely getting into some sort of mischief, as was his habit at age 3. This is everything I ever wanted, Sarah said quietly. A home full of love and laughter, children who know they are cherished, a husband who is my partner in every sense of the word. Sometimes I still cannot believe it is real. Believe it, Cole said, placing his hand on her belly where their newest child grew. This is our life, Sarah, the one we built together from nothing but hope and determination and love, and it is only going to get better from here. In October of 1885, Sarah gave birth to their final child, a daughter they named Catherine after Cole's first love. It was a tribute that showed the security and depth of their relationship, and Sarah suggested the name herself. She was part of your story, Sarah told Cole, as he held tiny Catherine for the first time. She helped make you the man you are, and I want to honor that. Cole wept as he cradled his daughter, this beautiful gift from the woman he loved, named for the woman he had lost. Thank you, he managed to say through his tears. Thank you for understanding, for being so generous of heart. The household with 6 children was chaotic and loud and utterly wonderful. Emma and Eleanor, now 4 years old, were natural helpers who loved caring for their younger siblings. James at 2 was still getting used to no longer being the baby, but he took to his role as big brother with enthusiasm. The twins, Daniel and David, were a year old and into everything, their identical faces lighting up whenever Cole or Sarah entered the room. And tiny Catherine, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, was the baby who completed their family. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch continued to grow, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Cole's skill and reputation meant they never lacked for work or income, and Sarah's management of the household and her charitable works made her a beloved figure in the community. They weathered hardships together, as all families do. There was the winter of 1887 when a blizzard killed several head of cattle, and they struggled to feed their animals through the spring. There was the summer of 1889 when James broke his arm, falling out of a tree, and Sarah sat by his bedside for 3 days while the fever from infection raged through his small body. There was the autumn of 1891 when Emma came down with scarlet fever, and they all prayed she would survive. Cole holding Sarah as she wept with fear, but they also celebrated triumphs. Emma's acceptance to the teaching college in Helena, the first of their children to pursue higher education. Eleanor's talent for music becoming apparent when she was 8, leading Cole to buy a piano that she played with increasing skill. James's way with horses rivaling his father's by the time he was 10. The twins developing a shared love of reading that saw them poring over every book they could get their hands on. Catherine's sunny disposition and quick mind making her a favorite with everyone who met her. Through it all, Sarah and Cole's love for each other only deepened. They had built not just a ranch, but a legacy, a family that would endure long after they were gone. They had proven that love and determination could overcome any obstacle, that a woman shunned for bearing daughters could find happiness beyond her wildest dreams, and that a cowboy looking for a purpose could find it in the most unexpected place. On their 10th wedding anniversary in June of 1893, Cole took Sarah back to the spot where he had first proposed, the yard where he had been building the chicken coop. The cabin was long gone, replaced by the sprawling ranch house, but the oak tree they had planted that first summer still stood, now tall and strong. 10 years, Cole said, pulling Sarah into his arms. 10 years since I asked you to marry me, and you said yes. Best decision I ever made. Best decision we ever made, Sarah corrected, smiling up at him. Look at what we have built, Cole. 6 beautiful children, a successful ranch, a life filled with love and purpose. This is what I dreamed of when I was a girl in Boston before I understood how hard life could be. And you made it possible." "We made it possible," Cole said, echoing her earlier words, "together. That is how we have always done things, and that is how we always will." From the house came the sounds of their children, Emma's voice calling that supper was ready, the younger ones laughing over some shared joke. Sarah and Cole stood for a moment longer under the oak tree, holding each other and marveling at the life they had created. "I love you," Sarah whispered, the words as true and powerful as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Cole replied, "now and always, for the rest of our days." They walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to share a meal with their children and count their blessings. Behind them, the sun set over the Montana hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple, a fitting backdrop for a love story that had started in darkness but found its way to light. The woman who had been shunned for bearing twins instead of sons had found a cowboy who said he always wanted a big family. Together, they had built a life that was richer and fuller than either of them had imagined possible. And as Sarah stepped through the door of her home, surrounded by the laughter of her children and the love of her husband, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Their story did not end that evening, of course. Life continued to unfold with all its joys and sorrows, its triumphs and challenges. But the foundation they had built together was strong enough to weather any storm. And as the years passed and their children grew and had families of their own, the legend of Sarah and Cole Merrick became a testament to the power of love, the value of every child, and the beauty of second chances. In the end, that was the real legacy they left behind. Not the successful ranch or the standing in the community, but the proof that one act of kindness, one moment of seeing someone's true worth could change everything. Cole had seen Sarah not as the town saw her, as a failure and a burden, but as a woman of strength and courage deserving of love. And Sarah had seen in Cole not just a rescuer, but a partner, someone who would stand beside her and build a future worth living. They had saved each other, and in doing so, they had created something beautiful and lasting. A family built on love rather than obligation, on respect rather than duty, on joy rather than resentment. And in the wild west of Montana Territory in the late 1800s, that was perhaps the greatest triumph of all. Many years later, when Sarah and Cole were old and gray, and their children had children of their own, they would sit on the porch of that ranch house and watch the sun set over the land they had built together. And Sarah would think back to that desperate young widow standing in the street with her twin daughters, believing her life was over. She would remember the tall cowboy who had stepped forward and changed everything with a few simple words and a generous heart. And she would smile, secure in the knowledge that she had been wrong that day in Silver Creek when she thought her story was ending. It had not been an ending at all. It had been the beginning of the greatest adventure of her life, the start of a love story that would endure through time and touch the hearts of everyone who heard it. The story of how she was shunned for bearing twins instead of sons, and how the cowboy said he always wanted a big family, and how together they proved that love could conquer anything.